So I just got out of therapy. And upon temporarily coming to New York, I really came here on a whim. And it came to me through a meditation. And within almost like a week and a half, I was here. There was a lot that I was starting anew, but a lot that I was also moving on from and wanting to let go. It really felt like a completion within my cycle. And once my body started to settle in and the newness started to feel like routine, that's when the processing began to happen. And the things that came up. And I was waiting for them to come up. I was waiting to process. I was like, when am I going to feel settled in so that I can process more and finally work through this? And as I was explaining this processing to my therapist, she was sort of like, is there a reason that you're working so hard to try to disconnect from these things? And that sort of gagged me because I felt a lump in my throat and I felt a lot coming up simply through that question. What I realized upon her asking me that, it felt like this sense of avoidance almost. It was actually coming from a reluctance to move on. And what she told me was sometimes the best way to move on is to just move on. And when we are trying so hard to disconnect, we are actually connecting ourselves further into that thing. When I think of my circumstances and when I think of what I'm moving on from, it doesn't feel sharp. It doesn't feel blatantly like traumatic. It doesn't feel edgy or razor sharp. It's something that feels flexible, feels malleable. I guess that sometimes almost makes it confusing because it's not just this one-sided yes or no, this is how it feels and that's certain. It is this complex, nuanced mix of all of these emotions of what is objectively true versus how I'm actually feeling. I almost wasn't allowing myself to move on, and it wasn't that I wasn't able to move on. I was the one contributing to this resistance to move forward. When really all that it is anchoring into what we actually want, need, and want to see in our life. And it goes hand in hand with me always wanting to overly prepare for everything. I'm thinking of all the outcomes that could possibly happen and sort of preparing for that thing. The thing that we were not preparing for is going to happen, and because we spent so much energy on trying to prepare for all of the other problems, we don't have as much energy for the thing that's actually happening. And instead of focusing on, and I was even so unaware of putting all of my energy and seeing that as putting all of my energy into problems because I'm so familiar, this is what was inherited, this is what I've believed for so long. I almost didn't have an awareness of how to stop. When I thought of what are new ways, how can I navigate this differently because something doesn't feel right, but this is all I know and this is all that I'm used to. How do I move through this? How do I create space in this so that I could make a shift? And what it really looks like is focusing on what we really want, because when we're focusing on what could go wrong, preparing for what could go wrong, all of our energy is going into that. And instead, when we create the shift of putting all of the energy into what we want to see, into what we actually need, then our world begins to change, because that is what our attention is. That's what we become. That's what we see. As the unprepared things come, then we deal with it as it comes. But then when you're constantly surrounding yourself with the energy of problems, then that's what everything is always going to feel like. And that is where this feeling of stuckness or this feeling of stagnation that I've been sitting with has been coming from. And it's given me a lot of homework. I'm feeling that it's going to make a lot of shifts. It's time to move forward. Sometimes the only way forward is through. And I think that I attached myself almost to that understanding that it was limiting, that I thought the only way for me to move on is through. So I kept trying to go through. I was like, how can I go through? How can I go through? Not understanding that I was confusing moving through something as being enmeshed in it, instead of allowing myself to just let it go and move on. I don't have to process it. I don't have to be ready. I don't have to be doing the work, because naturally I'm already doing those things. So I'm allowed to just move on, and we're allowed to look back and see where we once were. But it doesn't always have to look like working hard. It can just be And isn't that what we all are? We are just beings, and we are just being. And it's so fascinating how the journey of being and the process of being can be so funny to learn and unlearn. How difficult it's become to understand what truly being just is. And I hope that one day we can all just be at peace with being. May we continue just being.